right, Morgan, what do you got?
Well, John, it's always good to chat with you. And every
Yes.
time I talk to you, it seems like I'm bringing you another scandal story. And why is that?
Yes, why is that?
I don't know. I'm sure it's just coincidence. But, I did a video that launched today, and people can see it on my YouTube channel at We to Govern. But essentially, it's just focusing on what I think people need to start paying attention to more in our state, which is kind of this internal grifting operation that exists in government where insiders pass laws that they personally profit from and they make lots of money off of it. And it's unethical. It reeks of corruption and insider dealing, but it may very well be legal in our state. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be talking about it, because it's not what most of us would think of when we're thinking of public servants going down to Olympia and doing the people's work.
Yes.
It usually means they're supposedly working for us and not for themselves and their personal enrichment.
Right. Well, from We the Governed, I watched the whole thing, and then I did some research as well. And the comment that you just made, which was, it is legal what happens, and then you feel like, well, that's the end of the story. But if they write the laws as to what's legal and illegal, and they are able to bend those in a position to benefit themselves, then it doesn't pass the smell test. But legally, it's the way the law was written by the people that had the interest in themselves. So let's talk about our Senate Majority Leader, the case that you have found with Mr. Peterson. What did you find out?
Well, so Jamie Peterson, obviously state Senate leader, and the author and architect of a number of recent tax bills. The Climate Commitment Act was the one I mainly focused on here, but obviously he was heavily involved in the income tax bill as well. But one of the things that I think gets missed a lot, and by the way, none of the documents, none of the references that I'm giving here are super secret, deep throat sources inside of whistleblowers in government.
Yeah.
Those sources would be on top of this. This is just what you can find looking at the public documents with the Public Disclosure Commission or in contracts from some of they have DES agency contract data sets out there. So that's where you can get some of this information. But essentially, he works according to his own financial disclosure documents for a company called McKinstry, and he gets paid, somewhere. And the reason why I say that there's a range is because when you fill out these public affairs documents, you identify how much income you're getting through which source in a range. It doesn't give you the exact number. It just gives you a range. So he's making somewhere around $250,000 to $500,000 a year from McKinstry, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that, except that McKinstry is a company that that in his I won't say day job, but in his part-time job in the legislature, he's essentially writing bills that create laws that send business directly to his company, and his company gets a lot of sole source, no bid contracts to do these environmental building standard reviews, and they get Climate Commitment Act funds and all this other money that comes through his business, and he gets a cut of that. And it's not just that he gets a cut in the payroll, but according to his own financial records, he's also a percentage ownership, so he gets essentially dividends or ownership payouts that have basically increased year by year, tracking with the bills that he's able to get through the legislature, so that's money that comes right back into his pocket.
Right, but
here's another $150,000.
But here's the way the law is written: that you are not violating the law as long as you don't own more than 10% of the company. He owns 1% of McKinstry, so he gets paid. So when he's not down there making sure that the rich people pay their fair share, he's working for this company. And then if you back it up, as you've done in this piece at We the Govern, you see, okay, so he writes these laws. He sets up this new type of structure where it's profit but nonprofit. You could say, well, McKinstry is now doing work that's, helping the environment, so therefore they're into this separate category, and therefore it's a no-bid contract. So then they come up with, okay, we have all this money that we've ripped off from the people of Washington into the CCA. We're going to take part of that, and we're going to give that. Oh, what do you know? It's going over to Jamie's business, and they get it. They went from $4 million of Washington contracts to $40 million. I don't know how many years that took. And, everybody's happy. Jamie must be happy because, of course, we're lowering the Earth's temperature. and heating up the bottom line at the business that he works for. But again, because the way these laws are written, he's not doing anything illegal.
No, and keep in mind, he's also personally gone in and lobbied the Ethics Board and the Public Disclosure Commission to prevent the public from seeing who his clients are at McKinstry. So, we're only seeing a fraction of actually how much, influence that business that he works for, and he's legal counsel and vice president. I mean, it's not like he's not the frontline receptionist there, and so he's making strategic business decisions for them on a regular basis. And then when he goes down to the legislature, he gets to pass the laws that profit and allow his company to grow exponentially directly as a result of those laws. And keep in mind, a lot of the entities that are giving the contracts to the business he works for are public institutions like University of Washington or Eastern Washington University or other DES, which is the Department of Enterprise Services, which has a number of different public businesses out there or buildings out there, and they manage a lot of these buildings. And those are the same entities that are directly reflected by his decisions, Jamie Peterson's decisions, on the finance committee as to how big their budgets are going to be or how much their budgets might get cut next time around. And if you don't think they're making decisions on where their contracts go based on the fact that the guy who's going to decide what size of budget they have next year could potentially decide that maybe you deserve a 10% cut in your budget if that contract doesn't go to the business I happen to work for, wink, wink, then you're crazy, because that's exactly how human nature works, and it always has.
Yeah.
The problem is that, we do have ethics laws that say that there's all kinds of conflicts that you have to try to avoid. But over the years, they've been watered down, and Jamie Peterson's made he's taken full advantage of that or lobbied to get them watered down more so that he doesn't have to disclose a lot of the other people that are also benefiting from his access to power here. And one of the challenges is, and I've filed ethics complaints before in the past, and I've talked to people who sat on the ethics boards, and one of the things they say is that you can get in trouble for posting the wrong Facebook, TikTok video during the legislative session, and you can get fined $5,000 for a Facebook post that was wrong, as a Republican legislator discovered a few years ago.
Yeah.
But you can go and do this and have what amounts to, over a few years, millions of dollars coming into your, tens of millions of dollars into your business, and ultimately, over a number of years, millions of dollars into your own personal back pocket, directly related to decisions that you're making in Olympia as your official capacity as state senator. And that's totally fine. Nothing wrong. Nothing to see there. Look the other way.
Yeah, but the interesting thing, if you did have a complaint, you could take it to the Legislative Ethics Board. But then when you take it to the board, you go, well, look at that. Peterson's on the board.
Yeah, he's sitting on the board. Now, obviously, he would theoretically, I'm going to put air quotes around this, recuse himself from it, but it's his friends that are on that board, and they're not going to, ever hold him accountable. And this is the challenge that you face when you're trying to dig into some of the problems that we have with insider dealing, or what most of us would consider unethical behavior. It may be obviously unethical on its face, but it doesn't mean that they have laws against it, because the very people who write the laws have decided to exempt themselves from them. And it's kind of like the insider dealing that you see in Congress back in D.C. that, makes national news all the time. It's just people don't realize the same thing happens at the state level, only it's oftentimes even more obvious. And this is just the public side of it. Keep in mind, there's a bunch of stuff that's happening that you would have to get different sources or get it through much less obvious sources. This is something that anybody listening to the show could look this information up in about 5 minutes and have access to the same information that I'm describing here. And,
let me give you an example. Let me give you an example. So Jamie Peterson helps to write the Clean Buildings Performance Standard. This is Law HB 1257, mandating. So they write the law. They mandate that large buildings meet strict energy efficient targets, right? And then guess who comes in to make sure that the large buildings meet the energy efficiency target and does the work to make sure that they meet those targets? Happens to be which company?
What do you know? It's McKinstry, where he works.
Wait a minute. Are you saying, so I write a law that says that the buildings have to reach this level of efficiency, And then once I write the law, then now there's a scramble for funds in order for the buildings to reach that level of efficiency. And then they have to call a company in order to meet that standard. And they happen to pick up the phone, and Jamie Peterson's business answers and says, oh, we'll go do that work for you, and we'll charge you $60 million, whatever it is, I don't know what the number amount, that they then get paid. So I write the law, create the bar that has to be jumped over, and then the company that helps the business get over that bar happens to also be my own business.
Right, the one I own and the one that pays me $500,000 a year on top of that.
That sort of seems weird. What a weird coincidence.
Just endless coincidence, especially when there's about 6 laws like this that he's written that directly come back to the company that he worked for as the primary sole source no bid contractor as well for a lot of government clients, which are also conveniently just happen to be the same clients that have to go before him and beg for their budget every single legislative session. He's the guy that he's the head of the Senate, so he gets to control the agenda. He gets to control. He has substantial influence on the budget, and he gets to decide what hearings are happening on what bills. And every one of those public entities, like the University of Washington, like Eastern, all of them, they have to go through him. And believe me, they know this. And so so of course, which company is going to get their business? I'm sure it's just a total coincidence and a pure just fate that tens of millions of dollars of those contracts on an annual basis goes directly to his company, and it's gone up 100% over the last couple of years.
Right. Plus, he's also involved in the alternative public works. So he's involved in the legislation governing how state agencies hire the general contractors. So he's also involved in which ones get chosen and which ones don't. And it just turns out it's the weirdest coincidence that his company that he works for really meets the standards of what general contractors will be chosen.
And wouldn't you know, here's another odd coincidence that I'm sure would just totally amaze people, but his company is also the one that spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on lobbyists that go down to Olympia and lobby, presumably, him and all of his potentially wayward fellow senators and legislators who may not be on board with all of his agendas or plans or bill ideas, and it just helps grease the skids, and what do you know, his company's paying for that. And why would they not pay for it? Because spending a couple $100,000 on lobbying in Olympia is a heck of a good deal when you're going to get tens of millions of dollars in contracts back.
You know what Al Pacino would say? Al Pacino would say,
I am the law!
I am the law. Yeah, there you go, right there.
Or he just run for office, which is really a much more wise choice if you want to be involved in these kind of operations.
You know, because he seems like a very smart guy, although his explanation as to how income's not property doesn't make sense. But, why would you want to be working in Olympia for, I don't know, $48,000 a year or something, right? What do you get out of that? I mean, it takes a lot of your time. But then if you can go back after you're not in Olympia, and you go back, and now you're directing all of these funds, as I mentioned, that McKinstry went from $4 million to $40 million in funds coming from our pocketbook into the gas tanks and then into the CCA that is doing an amazing job, just an amazing job of decreasing the CO2 in the state of Washington as given to us by the Department of, which one came out with it, said that it was like 70% or something like that. And then Todd Myers found out that no, actually you haven't done crap with the money that we've given you.
Yeah, I mean, that's, $1 billion is potentially going to buy you. They said this massive amount, 75 million metric tons of carbon removed from the environment. And Todd Myers from the Washington Policy Center recognized within hours of that report coming out, it was Department of Ecology and Commerce that put it out, and Department of Commerce is who manages the Climate Commitment Act cash stash. And so they basically put this report out, which presumably there's at least 100 some odd employees. I mean, I've read the public records requests. I've gone through how many employees look at the most minute, minor little report they'll put out. Sometimes 50 of them will have their hands on it. So there's no way this document came out without at least 100 employees who work in these different government agencies. And they all reviewed it and they all signed off on a number that was so false that Todd Myers immediately identified it as wrong and posted about it real time on X And then a few months later, sure enough, it came out. They were off by 98%, and they had to adjust it down to a pathetic and probably unsubstantiated little minor level that they claim of carbon that they actually removed for the small price of $1 billion, and the reason why everybody's paying an extra 40 cents a gallon in gas, and why your fuel and your costs and your power bill at home just jacked up 15 to 20%, which, by the way, that was concealed from you, too, because Bob Ferguson sued or threatened to sue any of the public utility districts or the Puget Sound Energy for daring to reveal just how much the Climate Commitment Act was going to increase your power bill. And that is how it rolls in Olympia, and this is why you go there and become the state majority leader in the House.
But the problem for you at We the Govern, Glenn, is that everything that he is doing, although you look at it and go, well, this is obviously immoral, or who cares about morals, but it's not illegal in the state of Washington. So you would not be able to file anything that would be able to stop this type of grift from happening because they write the laws, they determine what's wrong or right, and then they just make sure that the money goes where the money needs to go after the laws that are written, and then it benefits people, like at McKinstry, right?
Sure. And I mean, listen, just because something's legal right now, I mean, there's a lot of things that are very bad and ugly in history that have been legal at different times. And I'm sure we can come up and think of all kinds of things.
Sure.
Just because slavery was legal at one time doesn't make it a moral activity. But sometimes what you want to do is go out and reveal the fact that this is what's actually going on. This is how your taxpayer dollars are being spent. This is the damage and abuse that's being inflicted on us by these policies. And the very people who are doing that and standing up and acting like they're so self-righteous about it are the very people who are profiting by essentially millions of dollars over time, and their shareholders and their friends. There's plenty of gravy on the train.
Yeah.
So you can ladle it out all to the people that really matter, whether that's Jay Inslee, whether that's Bob Ferguson, whether that's their campaign contributors, whoever it is, but making sure you spread around, because this is a team effort. You can never do it totally alone. You're not an island. So you got to hand it out to your friends, and there's plenty of grift to hand out. And you and I and everybody else, well, that's who's paying for it.
Well, listen, as long as everybody's happy at the Christmas party there, if Peterson keeps bringing the money in. All right, it's all there, all your work at We the Govern. Glen Morgan, keep up the good work, and you are truly a troublemaker.